morning and thank you for joining us on Thursday, the 27th of March, and we're very glad that you've switched on your televisions and you're watching Good Morning Sri Lanka this morning. Now on today's show we're talking a lot about creativity in many different ways, but to start off the show we've got someone who has been a bit of a familiar face here on Good Morning Sri Lanka. We've got Roseanne Gray, who is a business psychologist and of course a writer, and the last time Roseanne and I had this conversation many years ago makes us sound a little old, no Roseanne? We start off like that, was in the capacity of a writer, but today we're talking about two different things. We're talking about one thing but in different aspects. We're talking about creativity, and creativity is such an essential part of our lives, but somewhere down the line when you use the word creativity, people get a little nervous around it. Let's talk about your experiences of creativity also, because it's you come from two different backgrounds, as it were. You're a writer and a business psychologist, and obviously people don't often see that going hand in hand as a creative writer and a business psychologist. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, you mentioned something very interesting. You said sometimes people do get nervous when they hear the word creative, and that's because we are under the impression that not every one of us are made to be creative, but that is actually very wrong thinking. With many research, they said it's now been revealed that there is the left brain side, the left brain and the right brain, and the functions are very different, but there's also a lot of research to say that creativity is not just a single function. It is a function of the entire brain. So it doesn't go to say that an engineer cannot be creative just because he's a left brainer. I see why people become very nervous is because from their childhood, I feel the education system destroys creativity. It doesn't only happen in Sri Lanka, it happens all over the world.
Obviously, when we're talking about education and different systems and how creativity is kind of destroyed, that I think, especially in Sri Lanka, we seem to have a huge focus towards driving your children towards achieving success academically, but when it comes to more creative paths, your parents especially are very apprehensive to send them down that path. It's almost like they hold on to them and say, please don't do this. What are your thoughts on it?
There is a hierarchy in the education system where they consider mathematics and sciences to be at the very top. So if you follow that, you're seen as being more intelligent.
You're brainy.
Exactly.
Brainy. And
then the humanities, and then it's arts. And even within arts, there's a hierarchy. So if you're a painter, or a writer, you're in a higher position than if you were a dancer or if you were to follow drama. So it's actually the hierarchy that governs our thinking, and also this concept of somebody being more intelligent than the other person. But what is intelligence? We're just we are measuring intelligence in terms of IQ, and that is normally verbal and numerical knowledge. That's mathematical and linguistic knowledge. But what about the other areas, especially creativity in terms of solving life problems? Kinesthetics, so it's dancing and movement, performing arts, all that, and even interpersonal skills and also intrapersonal skills about you understanding yourself. That's all a part of intelligence, but this never gets measured when it comes to intelligence. So it's the wrong perception of what intelligence is all about.
Yeah, you talked of things like math and science being slightly, more on the top of the list. For instance, when a student picks his or her A-level subjects, and you say you're in the math stream, there's a label. You're in the science stream, there's a label. You're in the commerce stream, there's a label. And in the art stream, and they all look at you like, like you've got a bleak future and there's no hope for you. You're stuck in one place. That's kind of how it works here, unfortunately.
That's right.
But that's a system that we need to break away from and change. So it starts off there in school, and then obviously when you're done, you
go into university, and I lecture in the university, and I know at the beginning how hard it is for us to get students to talk. And I think this actually sadly comes from schools where teachers don't allow the students to challenge the teaching.
There's no creative process even in being allowed to challenge something.
That's right, and also it's the power issue where the teacher is seen as having more power. That's of course it's the case, but a student should also be able to ask questions and challenge what's being taught to them. And we find it very difficult to change that mindset when they come to university.
Kind of unlearn before you learn.
Exactly. And because that is really important, and the statistics show that 70% of the jobs are not yet created when students enter university. So they are, in 3 years, 4 years down the line, they are entering jobs that are actually not existent now. So these are the children that we need to groom to solve social problems, medical problems, environmental problems in the future. But are we equipping them with the right creative skills to do that? I'm not really sure about that.
You're not really sure about that. Slightly bleak thoughts this morning, but these are the facts of life. So how important a role does creativity play in our day-to-day life is what we're looking at. We've talked about education, we've talked about leaving school, going to university, and then of course it's a great big world out there. You move into your jobs and so on. Right. And then that's a completely different problem. How does and creativity is such an essential part of resolving issues when you're in workspaces and things like that. How do you see it? How does that balance work?
We have a database with some qualitative research on what managers say, what their greatest challenges are. Actually, one of the greatest challenges that they face is to get people to step out of their comfort zone, to perform and think outside the box. And that is, again, they are bringing the same mindset from the education system. Of course, this can be changed. We can change, or rather train people to be more creative, take them on thinking expeditions, getting them to look at the same problem from different angles, put them into groups of diverse, heterogeneous groups where they have to work with others, and actually change the individualistic behavior that is now very prevalent in the workplace as well. Sometimes it's about your comfort zone, what is it that I can get, and not really taking too much of responsibility. So you have to really take a break away from that, and to be more dynamic is, I think, is the greatest asset that you can take to an organization.
Mm-hmm. Now, as a business psychologist, if a company was to come to you and they would ask you these questions, like you said, about the biggest problem that they have would be able to find people who think out of the box, or to have people that they already have within their company who should be thinking out of the box. And you mentioned a couple of activities, but what else can be done if it's not just an activity based, like a weekend program or whatever? What else can someone do to encourage that kind of thinking on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so the culture has to be a creative culture. You have to foster creativity, and it actually has to come from the top. So if the manager doesn't believe in this the creative process, he's not going to allow or give the freedom for his subordinates to perform this. Also, there has to be a budget allocated for calculative risk-taking. So when you're allowing people to make mistakes, of course, within certain boundaries. Again, a cultural problem we have is the fear of failure, fear of evaluation. You don't want to be different because you don't want to be seen as somebody not belonging to the herd. And these are huge problems when it comes to innovating and bringing new solutions to the future.
Mm-hmm. Going back, digressing a little bit, we're talking about this in the context of workplace, but going back to schools also, I mean, that's where the problem really starts. Even from the level of nursery or Montessori, you've got little children who are trained to think a certain way. Obviously, there's a little more creativity there, but the second you get to, say, grade 3, grade 4, that's when everything clamps down on you, and you're supposed to be a certain way. How do you tackle that at that level? Or what should people be thinking? What can be added to change that system?
I think many elements have to go hand in hand: the environment and the child's natural inclination towards learning. For example, most of the dancers, I recently watched this TED talk saying dancers think while they dance. So if you put a dancer into a classroom, get her to sit at a desk and perform something else, that person or that child might be tabooed or stigmatized as having attention deficit hyperactive disorder, because this child is active all the time and might be seen as the child being overactive. Whereas in the dance class, she might be in her element, and that is the beauty of creativity, that being in your element. And we all know, you and I are different. Every one of us, we're very different. So our element, where we actually sort of marry the nature, that point is also very different. So the creative process is when something within you sort of clicks with something outside you. And as a writer, I know this. The inexplicable beauty of writing is that some people think creativity is just one thought. It's an idea. It's not. It's a whole process.
It is a whole process, and it's very difficult sometimes to have people take that process seriously. We'll talk about that in just a bit, but right now we'll take a quick break. Hi everyone, welcome back to Good Morning Sri Lanka. We're talking, of course, with Rosen Kure, who is a business psychologist and a writer. Now, she's been on this show in both capacities, as a business psychologist and as a writer. And today we have her here talking about both aspects, but really focusing on creativity. And just before the break, we were talking about people taking the process of creativity seriously enough because it's sometimes very difficult for those who are maybe who don't practice creativity or to take it seriously, to understand how important the processes are. As a writer, I'm sure you often have people who think that writing is just sitting and then you write a couple of sentences and then you've got a book and a paragraph, a chapter, a book, and then you're done. As someone from a slightly more design background, I know people think that design is just a pen, a paper, you sketch something and you're done. But it's very difficult to explain to people that there's a research process, a creative process that happens afterwards, and then you've got your final product. It's a long process. How do you pitch this process to people and have people take creativity seriously?
Well, I would point out many people who have become successful in the creative fields, but I know and I'm aware that people still wouldn't buy into it. That because of the hierarchy that the education system has imposed on us for over hundreds of years, we still tend to think that the ones that are in the top of the hierarchy are much superior. But the concept of being successful, again, is and intelligent sometimes goes hand in hand with what's on top of the hierarchy, because that's also what's more powerful. Intelligent, more successful, and more powerful. But I would say that how we can get people to really buy into it is to get them to think that creativity is a part and parcel of life. It's a life skill. If you're stranded in an island all by yourself at 6:30 and you hear all these scary sounds, you're all by yourself, what would you do? Creative problem solving. Okay, that's superior form of intelligence, but people don't understand that. There was a piece of it's not research, it's something that happened in the Philippines. It's how in the rural and the very poor areas they don't get enough light even during the day in these shanties for them to cook and do their normal household chores. So what they did was they actually created a bulb out of plastic bottles. Okay, and how did that come about? So sometimes in people's minds, especially I know this is the case amongst writers, amongst maybe, I don't know, with designers, and innovators as well. Creativity and innovation is